This lecture was written first on a desktop computer, then on an iPad. It was then recorded back on a computer and is now available online, reproducible via audio and video for as long as YouTube is publicly accessible. Like water from the sink, we seldomly question the infrastructural marvel that allows the stream of reproducible information. This is something I'm unable to explain as a type designer, but it is something we must muse over as designers. We left the last lecture with the words on beauty by the Italian designer Bruno Minori. If you want to know something else about beauty, what precisely it is, look at the history of art. You will see that every age has had its ideal Venus or Apollo, and all these Venuses or Apollos put together and compared out of the context of their periods are nothing less than a family of monsters. Beauty for him, and for many designers of the modernist movement of the early part of the 20th century, believed it to be something that is logically coherent. Beauty, Minori states, is something formally coherent. We have therefore discarded beauty in the abstract sense, as something stuck on the technical part of a thing, like a stylish car or a body decoration tastefully chosen from the work of some great artist. Instead, we have formal coherence, rather as we see it in nature. A leaf has the form it has because it belongs to a certain tree and fulfills a certain function. Its structure is determined by the veins which carry the sap, and the skeletons that support it might have even been worked out by mathematics. Even so, there are many kinds of a leaf, and the leaves of any single tree differ slightly among themselves. But if we saw a fig leaf on a weeping willow, we would have the feeling that all is not well. It would lack formal coherence. A leaf is beautiful not because it is stylish, but because it is natural, created in its exact form by its exact function. Outside of nature, we can think of the columns on a building. Despite the stylistic spectacle that could evoke emotions on the viewer, we could consider the Greek columns on the famous Las Vegas casino, Caesar's Palace, to be ugly. Not out of mere aesthetic preference, but because the columns serve no particular purpose. Form emptied from function. We can, however, consider the columns of the Parthenon, the ancient temple of the Greek goddess Athena, to be beautiful, not out of mere aesthetic preference, but because the columns, beyond holding aesthetic value, also actually support the weight of the building. This sort of argument of beauty became the center of concern during the Industrial Revolution from around 1760 to 1840. The natural world and its values became one quickly supplanted by one distorted by machines, by industry, by profit. Cultural critics such as Walter Pugin, a British architect, sought to establish a link between aesthetics to the moral health of a society in his seminal work, Contrasts. We can picture the landscape he might have seen in 19th century England in the paintings such as those by the famous Romantic painter J.M.W. Turner. In his Rain, Steam, and Speed, we see a pre-impressionistic snapshot of England. We see here a landscape unrecognizable by the smoke and steam of a newly built railroad system. Rather than depicting the natural world with a push of realism, Turner gave way to the depiction of light, color, and atmosphere. The world had become modern first in England with the Industrial Revolution. The Liverpool and Manchester Railway, which opened in 1830, were public carriers of both passengers and freight. By 1870, Britain had about 13,500 miles of railroad. Pugin's contrast was a criticism of politics. The price of industrialization was the well-being of the common people and their living conditions. You can see the squalor and deprivation of Victorian London brought about the Industrial Revolution in the illustrations of Gustave Doré. Charles Dickens would describe a slum called Jacob's Island in South London as a place of crazy wooden galleries, with holes from which to look upon the slime beneath, windows broken and patched, rooms so small, so filthy, so confined that the air would seem too tainted even for the dirt and squalor which they shelter. Dirt besmeared walls and decaying foundations. Pugin sought answers in the wisdom of the past. For him, morality was forgotten, and so too was beauty forgotten. Benedictine monasticism had brought normality into Europe after the collapse of the Roman Empire. In this, he formulated his solutions, wishing to bring back this Christian social order. Here we see a Plato Mistreatus contrast. On the top, we see two instances for housing of the poor. On the top, we see a utilitarian industrial structure, a panopticon, that is, a prison-like structure where prisoners, the sick, and in this case the poor, could be monitored and controlled by a few minority. English law made it so that you could end up in such a prison if in debt, or if you failed to pay taxes. On the bottom, we see a medieval almshouse, where the destitute were treated with dignity, receiving clothing and a substantial meal of mutton, beef, and bacon. And perhaps you're all too familiar with these types of social concerns. After all, this topic dominated the news in the past few years. This is also true for French philosopher Guy Debord, who saw architecture and the urban environment as a study of the precise laws and the specific effects on the geographical environment, consciously organized or not, on the emotions and behaviors of individuals, especially in the case of urban environments. In the developments of capitalist societies, work and the city became alienating forces, stripping people from their dignity of their work. In Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle, he states that the authentic social order had been replaced by an immense accumulation of spectacles. Everything that once was directly lived had moved away into a representation. Just like during the Industrial Revolution, with its ability to produce an unimaginable quantity of goods, society had once again turned to social revolution, seeking to alleviate the growing pain of this post-World War consumerism. In this post-World War Europe, the continent had once again opened its markets, and with it, consumer goods flooded people's homes. Cars, appliances, furniture had to be consumed. Guy Debord's works did not come in the context of social media, Instagram, or Netflix. Like the name of the artist collective which he belongs suggests, the Situationist International sought to turn away from consumption, seeking instead situations that broke the dullness and alienation of a post-industrial world. One such practice was the Reeve, an unplanned journey through a landscape, usually urban, in which participants drop their everyday relations and let themselves be drawn by the attractions of the terrain and the encounters they find there. For Pugin, my devout Catholic, design was a concrete representation of the morality of society, seeking solutions not in a style of design, but in an approach to design as a result of a social order. For Debord, a Marxist atheist, a healthy society, placed in the overabundance of design, is found in the conscious moments of social interaction. For Vignelli, these spiritual concerns are absent, seeing design/human activity as something that must be semantically considered, syntactically consistent, and pragmatically understood. And lastly, for Bruno Benari, beauty is that which is formally coherent. Ultimately, however, what we create, the designs we relish are but ugly monsters, creations of the follies of whatever age we live in.